what do you think, if it was up to you, how would you organize how psychedelics are controlled in the United States and throughout the world? How would you do it to mitigate some of the negative effects of the black markets and things like that, and maybe sort of like a irresponsible use in the
Hmm.
States?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the tools that we need to do that are right there already, not just in the way that we regulate, say, alcohol or tobacco or pharmaceutical or prescription drugs, but also generally the way that we regulate, risky or dangerous activities, dangerous sports, and so on. I don't think this is complicated. I'm not a I'm not a bureaucrat, but there are lots of very able bureaucrats out there, and this is really about the evidence, following the evidence for the system that produces that minimizes harms. And there are lots of different categories and lots of different ways of doing this available. My preference, I think, would be to something that was kind of bottom up and local rather than kind of top down and federal. There are some interesting examples in Europe of things like in Spain, the cannabis clubs, as they're called, the marijuana clubs, which are kind of membership clubs, where once you join, you can kind of put in 2 or 3 plants to be grown and get them back, and these clubs are...
That sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and these clubs are licensed, so they have to stick to the terms of their license. If if the substances that they're given are found being sold on the streets, they lose their license. If a lot of people seem to have misadventures and a lot of harm is caused by their members, they lose their license. But how they manage that is up to them. So that's a model that appeals to me for psychedelics, because I think it's one where a lot of the lessons that need to be learnt can be taught by other psychedelic users, and that's really the best place for them to come from. So clubs can be different, depending on their clientele, depending on the areas that they're covering. If people feel that you need to be pretty cautious and mandate that somebody has to have a straight trip sitter the first time they use or whatever, that's up to them. So it seems to me that trying to get government to legislate on all these tiny details is never going to work, but a lot of it can be solved, from the grassroots by common sense.
Yeah, I agree. I like that bottom up idea. It's usually when you're trying to do something top down, there's always something that gets left out. Well, so recently, psychedelics have become more respected in academia, and I think that's a great thing. But there's been I think, an overemphasis on a kind of medicinal framework. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm with you, Ariel. I think it's. I mean, there are 2 kind of schools of thought about this. I mean, a lot of the people who've been, trying to make psychedelics acceptable for a long time have pushed the medicalization model, because they say, it's like with marijuana, you go there first, and then you answer a lot of the questions and deal with a lot of the problems, and then you can extend further to general legal regulation. But certainly at the moment, a lot of the rhetoric that's coming from people who are pushing for medical, clinical, therapeutic use is to try and distinguish what they're doing very clearly from what they call recreational use, which is illicit and, in their view, dangerous and so on. That's, I think clinical medicine is going to have a very hard time adjusting to psychedelics. They're not like other pharmaceutical medicines. The way that they're used is not the same. This is really a kind of talk therapy to which they're an adjunct. And I think at this point, I suspect that clinical practitioners have a lot more to learn from what they call recreational users than the other way around.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And in some sort of I guess this is a kind of we've come full circle, because if you look at the way psychedelics are have been approached in the past, right, by the native peoples of North and Mesoamerica. Um, it, it seems like a kind of ancient form of talking cure. You know, there's a kind of setting.
Mhm.
There's a priest who officiates over, you know, or roadman, you know, who officiates over the proceedings. It's not a kind of one-to-one correlation between this chemical compound and this effect, you know.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be forced to go there, you know. Yeah, yeah.
That's exactly it. And I think that's happening already. If you look at the way that, for example, Marines and military veterans with PTSD are using substances like ayahuasca, you know, that's very much a group thing. It looks more like something like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous than it does like a clinic. And it seems that what's really important there is to be going through this experience with people who share your condition, who share your trauma, and who also have been through this therapy as well. You know, there's a great film of this with Marines saying to each other, look, I know it sounds crazy taking this weird psychedelic drug, but trust me, you know, I was where you are now, and it really worked for me. And it seems to me that's what you need, and that's what you get. You know, as you referenced in something like the Native American church, everybody sits down and does it together. It's a group experience. Everybody helps everybody. It's not just about, you know, the individual. It's about, you know, the whole group healing itself. And then immediately with, you know, clinical medicine, we're starting, you know, with this medical professional figure in the center. So you're lying there in a clinic and you've got your eye mask on and you're listening to music on the headphones, and there's this strange kind of power dynamic and imbalance. And this is somebody you're going to see for one day and probably never see in the rest of your life. You know, all these things are, you know, I think if you start, I mean, obviously people are starting from the necessity to, you know, get these substances approved by the FDA or whatever. So it's all working through those clinical pharmaceutical structures. But I think if you started from the experience and from the healing that you're trying to generate, you would come up with something much more like, you know, these kind of group PTSD sessions, or Alcoholics Anonymous, or something much more like that kind of sort of group healing with, you know, long-term support.